I am continuing my reading. What I'm doing in this series is to read through the entire standard works of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This consists of the Bible, the Book of Mormon, the Doctrine and Covenants, and the Pearl of Great Price. I am reading in a chronological order of events, not according to publication or volume, so I will be skipping around a bit as I move along. So we are still in Ezekiel, and this will be chapter 19. I also want to mention that this video does have a Joseph Smith translation in it. What the Joseph Smith translation is, this is an inspired translation or correction of the Bible done by Joseph Smith to restore those passages that had been lost over the years. Ezekiel laments for Israel because she has been taken captive by other nations and planted in dry and thirsty ground. Moreover, take thou up a lamentation for the princes of Israel, and say, What is thy mother? A lioness. She lay down among lions and nourished her whelps among young lions. And she brought up one of her whelps. It became a young lion, and it learned to catch the prey, to devour men. The nations also heard of him. He was taken in their pit, and they brought him with chains into the land of Egypt. Now when she saw that she had waited, and her hope was lost, then she took another of her whelps, and made him a young lion. And he went up and down among the lions. He became a young lion, and learned to catch the prey, and devoured men. And he knew their desolate palaces, and he laid waste their cities, and the land was desolate, and the fullness thereof by the noise of his roaring. Then the nations set against him on every side from their provinces, and spread their net over him. He was taken in their pit, and they put him in ward and chains, and brought him to the king of Babylon. They brought him into holes, that his voice should no more be heard upon the mountains of Israel. Thy mother is like a vine in thy blood, planted by the waters. She was fruitful and full of branches by reason of many waters. And she had strong rods for the scepters of them that bear rule. And her stature was exalted among the thick branches, and she appeared in her height with the multitude of her branches. But she was plucked up in fury. She was cast down to the ground, and the east wind dried up her fruit. Her strong rods were broken and withered, for the fire consumed them. And now she is planted in the wilderness, in a dry and thirsty place. And fire is gone out of the rod of her branches, which hath devoured her fruit, so that she hath no strong rod to be a scepter to rule. This is a lamentation, and shall be for a lamentation. What are these two lion whelps that the mother gave birth to? It says one was taken into Egypt, but God, the only reference there that I can remember, that I can think of, is the captivity in Egypt just before the time of Moses. The second one taken into Babylon, that's obvious. So is the lion's whelp, the first lion's whelp, the early Israelites before they became the 12 tribes, when they were still just the 12 sons of Jacob? According to the footnotes, this is supposed to be a reference to Judah, but again, it doesn't, I'm not sure that makes sense. Although it is true now that I think about it, that Jehoahaz, the son of Josiah, was taken captive into Egypt, and Jeconiah, the son of Jehoiakim, was taken captive into Babylon, as will Zedekiah be. So maybe it's referencing that. The mother is the house of Israel before the divided kingdoms, and the two young lions are Jehoahaz and Jeconiah. Jehoahaz is taken captive into Egypt. A new line is set up with Jehoiakim, but then his son is taken captive into Babylon. Now that would make sense. Now when it says a dry and thirsty land, I mean, Babylon was not exactly a dry and thirsty land. It was in the desert, it was in the plains, but it was in the crescent valley of the Tigris and Euphrates River. They had a fair amount of crops being grown there. So the footnotes don't really tell you much. It just references back to Kings. So I'm thinking that the dry and thirsty land might be a metaphor for being away from God. They're in a land that does not have the gospel. Babylon was somewhat in the desert, so I don't know. Before we sign off, though, there is this small Joseph Smith translation in verse 10. So rereading that in the King James says, Thy mother is like a vine in thy blood, planted by the waters. In thy blood. That doesn't make sense. Joseph Smith simply removes that. So instead of like a vine in thy blood, planted by the waters, it simply reads, Thy mother is like a vine planted by the waters. Now why that in thy blood was added at all makes no sense. But just removing it does make the whole thing work out much more nicely. But we leave that here. It's a nice short chapter. We'll leave it here and pick it up in chapter 20. So see you there.